Welcome to Interludes with Chris Mackenzie. And another joyful day in the studios at Golden Days Radio as I welcome back Bud Tingwell.
Thank you very much indeed, Chris. Nice to be back.
Oh, it's lovely to have you back again here. Actor, producer, director.
An avid fan of 95.7 now. It's my anti-road rage device now. It's replaced Sinatra. Because I've got it permanently on the FM, and 95.7, I can get it even way over in Doncaster. And now I play that if the traffic's crook. And because I used to play Sinatra whenever I was road raged. Now 95.7 is my thing. And I do switch over to the AM occasionally, and if I hear anybody trying to get me to go on strike or something like that, I go back to 95.7. I won't say which station tells you to do that on the AM.
No, you're not allowed to do that. The last time you were in here, we talked about, the last thing we talked about was the great times that you had doing Breaker Morant and Jack Thompson and who you said Teddy Woodward. Teddy Woodward. I've always called him Edward, but never mind.
He is Edward Woodward, yes.
Yes, he is.
And he has a very cute way of saying what his name sounds like, but I don't think I'm allowed to say it even on air.
No.
Something in a bottle, he says. Edward Woodward.
Edward Woodward. Now, where did you go from there?
Well, I don't remember really, except there was all a wonderful blur of all sorts of amazing things. Breaker turned out to be a wonderful working experience, and I loved the way Bruce Beresford went about it. We had a fantastic sound guy on called Gary Wilkins, who's an old mate from the Crawford days, and just everything about it was excellent, and it was so good that I just sat in my chair. And the assistant director would come up and said, "Look, you can go back and relax somewhere if you like." I said, "You won't be required for about half an hour." I said, "No, I just want to sit and watch." And I did. It was marvellous. I just loved the whole way everybody worked, particularly Edward and Jack. Jack Thompson. They set very, very high working standards. And everything about that production was very good indeed. Now, I'm going to say something very controversial, I think. I'm not sure that it was all that accurate, because I've since heard hints that the whole thing was a bit more controversial and not necessarily as pro-Australian as we once believed. It's
just been coming into the papers quite recently about it. There's been a bit of discussion. People are doing their homework and digging around.
We have to remember, too, that whether we liked it or not, even in World War II, some of those penalties for stepping out of line were very, very severe. In all armies, on both sides of the battlefront.
Yeah. So, did you continue to make movies?
Yes. I can't remember the next one, but what I also did was quite a lot of directing and producing for Crawford's, and not only for Crawford's. I did occasionally for the ABC and some for Channel 10, round about that time, I think I was working behind the scenes on the very early days of Neighbours when it was on Channel 7. They'd engaged a marvellous Czechoslovakian actress called Dasha Blahova, great gal, and spoke very good English, but she wasn't used to working quite as fast as we do in Australia, and working with English. So John Holmes, who was the executive producer then, and still is at Channel 7, and I think of it now. But he hired me just to work with her and a couple of other people who weren't used to working at high speed for television. And then we were all a bit disappointed when Channel 7 let the show go. But of course, clever Channel 10 picked it up, and it's been there forever, and I hope for a long, long time to come.
Yes, I wondered, but I can't see it ever ending for any particular reason.
It's a wonderful training program, for people who young actors can get a bit snooty. Oh my golly, I'm going to have to do Neighbours, over the flat light beer, but they must realise that a few little boys who've done quite well since, like Russell Crowe and Guy Pearce, and quite a few people were working in Neighbours. And if they were wise, like Mel Gibson in The Sullivans, and if they were wise, they used that as part of an excellent training scheme.
Absolutely, and getting paid for it.
And that's right, yes. And not a fortune compared with overseas, perhaps, but on the other hand, regular work and working with excellent technical people, and from technical people, actors can learn a tremendous amount.
Now, I think we found actually my producer Alex has found a piece of music that we thought you might rather enjoy hearing.
Mm-hmm.
We'll listen to it, and then you can tell the audience about it. Okay, what does that tell you?
Emergency Ward 10. That was wonderful, actually. Except that I associated with getting very nervous and saying, no, what's my first line? When the hyperparathyroidism of the hemicolectomy appears to the left ventricle of the diathermy. Oh, my God, will I ever get it right? And good luck for the show, and you're on. Bang. And we were live to air. It was marvellous. I loved all that. No recording process in the very early days. And when we did go onto a recording process of some kind, I suppose it was early days of videotape, we were more nervous on tape than we were live, because there was something, it's a bit like in the theatre. You know, if the set does fall down, everybody's going to see it, so you might as well share the experience. But really, nothing ever went wrong when we were live. It was extraordinary. We were just so very well prepared. Something I'm always saying to young directors, prepare, and you can't go wrong.
Absolutely. Well, that took you back a long way.
Very happy memories.
Wonderful. So you're now producing and directing and doing things with Neighbours, and what else?
Oh, well, I was also doing a bit of acting here and there, and some lovely jobs came up, sort of sometimes out of the blue. I remember one of the casting people rang. I can't remember exactly when it was in the year, but have you got a beard? I said, no. Oh, I see. Oh, well, it doesn't matter. No, we can make one. Why? Is your hair long? Well, no, just had a bit of a short back and sides. Oh, well, it doesn't matter. You'll have a hat on. Anyway, so it turned out they wanted me to do a lovely film called Bushfire Moon. And they built a superb beard which they stuck on me, and it was directed by one of my Crawford colleagues, George Miller. There are two George Millers. There's Dr. George Miller, who did Mad Max and all those, and Noddy is his nickname, George Noddy Miller, who was one of Crawford's really fine directors and did wonderful shows like All the Rivers Run and things like that, and he was directing this movie, and he asked me to play Max, I think his name was, a former villain who in his youth had been, a cattle duffer and just a general villain around the country, and years and years and years go by, and he was a great mate of a lovely another villain played by Bill Kerr. Bill Kerr, the great Aussie actor, was a great mate. But in the meantime, Bill's character's gone straight and become a sort of pillar of the society and owns land and properties and things, and I'm still a villain. But he's got this big beard, walks into town and looking for his old mate to try and probably get some money or something from him. Little boy sees him and mixes him up with Santa Claus. So now the old villain with the big beard's got to try and pretend to be Santa Claus and act like Santa Claus. It was a lovely little moral tale. A lovely cast. John Waters and very nice American actress came out for it, Dee Wallace Stone, and it's one of the happiest movies I've ever done. And there were quite a few others like that, and some mini-series. There was the 4-minute mile one. Was that the title of it? But it was about breaking the 4-minute mile, and there were quite a lot of. It's an awful. I'm forgetting the names of them.
Wasn't it Roger Bannister was the 4-minute? Wasn't it?
Yes, maybe. I don't know.
Or John Landy.
I don't know. I refuse to commit
Bannister,
myself.
I think. Yes, he did.
And yes, but anyway, it was all about that, and but there were a lot of others too. And I know I was wearing a sports coat yesterday for a scene in this movie, this filming I was doing. And I know I got that jacket on one mini-series, and they said, keep it, you might as well keep it. It was a sports coat. And that jacket has been in several movies since, including Innocence. It's been seen around the world now, and yesterday too. I haven't worn it out yet. So.
Okay, well now listen, I'd like to talk about Innocence, but I'd like to play a piece of music that I think that you would like very much. Two wonderful violinists.
Oh my
okay, we'll talk about it after we hear it. Jealousy, yes. Jealousy, played by Yehudi Menuhin and Stefan Grappelli. How about that? And I believe that is special because you saw that played for the first time ever on television.
Yes, that's right. Audrey and I were great fans of Yehudi Menuhin's, and any collecting we did always included something of his, and also admired the way he worked with young people, and that fabulous school he ran just outside London, I think it was. And, the enormously high academic standards they found, that there's a strong connection with learning and music, and so it influenced us with our own children. And yes, they were learning the violin and learning piano and doing very well at school at the same time. But then when we saw this unlikely marriage suddenly before our very eyes with Stefan Grappelli, whom I didn't know much about, but with the great jazz traditions of France, and on they came, and this magical sound came out. And so anything they did, we sought out and watched, and they just seemed to work beautifully together. And they were getting on a bit. They were probably well past middle age by then.
Yes, I think so.
And it was great. And also what it did, a bit of a symbol, I suppose, for the world, if it would but learn, the marriage of two totally opposing kinds of, well, not opposing, but totally different kinds of music.
Yes. And
working so wonderfully well together. No, it was a great experience.
It was wonderful.
Very happy.
And it was apparently the first time that they had ever played together when that happened, yes.
Yeah.
Well, according to the record cover, anyway. Now, you mentioned before that wonderful music, the movie Innocence. Can we talk about that? Because it was such a great movie. I loved it.
Thank you for that. That's one of the very great experiences I've had as an actor. And working with Paul Cox, who I call the master director. One or two of the tough American critics also refer to him, I think, as Roger Ebert refers to him as master director Paul Cox in these rave reviews we got for Innocence in America. And I bumped into him not long after my wife died, Paul, Paul, at a film function, and he said, "Oh my golly, what a coincidence!" He said, "I've come up with an idea about people growing old, but never really, most of us never really change our inner feelings. We can still hate, we can love, we can fall in love, this, that, and the other. But yes, of course, physically we do change, and yes, don't get much better as time goes on." And he said, "I've got this idea about two people falling in love again at about the age of 70, and." He said something you and Julia could do, meaning Julia Blake. And anyhow, time went by, and early, I think it was in 1999, Paul Cox rang me. Now, I had done 2 movies with Paul before, but only smallish roles in beaut films to be in. Loved the way he worked, particularly with actors and the crew. And he said, you've any chance of being available? I think it was about May of 99. I said, gee, I think so. Why? He said, well, I've got the money, we can make that film I talked to you about that time. And only relatively recently did I find out that he actually meant that Julia and I should have played husband and wife, and Norman Kay was going to play the lover, because Norman had done some wonderful work with Paul over the years. But when he came to shoot it, Norman hadn't been too well, and he wasn't sure that he could handle a lead. So what Paul Cox did was to meet Terry Norris, Julia Blake's real husband, cast them as husband and wife, and asked me to play the lover. And it seems to have worked wonderfully well. And Norman, of course, Norman Kay came in and did that delightful guest role as the host at a dinner party. And so it was sort of win-win-win all the way around. And Paul sent me the script. It was so good, I've suggested, I don't know whether he's ever acted on it, but I suggested they try to publish it as a piece of work, call it a film script, but let it be read. It's a beautiful read, and it's an elegant piece of writing by Paul Cox, and it's a perfect model for any aspiring film writers. But that experience, that shoot was just superb.
It was absolutely just delightful. A bit of a tearjerker.
Yeah,
I have to tell you.
A few chuckles in one way and another.
Kleenex had to come out.
Oh yes. Oh yes, and some strange and very moving coincidences, which I won't bother to go into.
Yes, well, it's a sort of it was the sort of movie that. You could almost picture yourself in almost any of those roles.
Yes,
It doesn't matter with male or female,
That's
but
right.
the interaction and the words and so on.
Yes.
So after Innocence,
Gosh, what did I do? Oh, I did a lovely little film called Inside Story after that, which is waiting for release now. By a young Melbourne filmmaker, and they rustled up some money and got it together, and I've seen it. It works terribly well, but they haven't got a release for it yet, so I'm waiting for that to come out. And what else have I done? Oh, Ned Kelly. I'm in Ned Kelly, briefly. I think I did one day on that and had a scene with Geoffrey Rush, which was very exciting, except Geoffrey didn't have to say anything. He just had to sit there and listen to me read the Jerilderie letter. And I played the Premier of Victoria, and Geoffrey plays the police commissioner or police whatever, superintendent or whatever, but a top chap in the police force. And to have worked with Geoffrey Rush is great, because he's a terrific fella. I know him vaguely, sort of personally, but to work with him is just wonderful.
He suddenly, for most of us, he sprang out of nowhere and became instantly famous.
That's right. No, overnight for about the last 25 years, doing superb work in the theatre and the Hamlets and all the real stuff.
All the real stuff,
and then suddenly pops up in a little movie called Shine, which is one of the best movies of this decade. I was in Scott Hicks, who directed Shine. I was in Scott's first movie, and I can never remember the name of it. It was a one-word title, like Shine, and we shot it in South Australia, and it was great. He was an excellent director anyway, but to see the development from that film to Shine, wow, it was amazing.
Now, before we're not going to have to finish immediately, but quite soon, there's a funny man who, alas, is long gone. Are we going to play a bit of Benny Hill?
Oh, please, yes.
You could hear the hoofbeats pound as they raced across the ground, and the clatter of the wheels as they spun round and round. And he galloped into Market Street, his badge upon his chest. His name was Ernie, and he drove the fastest milk cart in the West. Now Ernie loved a widow, a lady known as Sue. She lived all alone in Lily Lane at number 22. They said she was too good for him, she was haughty, proud and chic. But Ernie got his cocoa there 3 times every week. They called him Ernie. And he drove the fastest milk cart in the West. She said she'd like to bathe in milk. He said, all right, sweetheart. And when he'd finished work one night, he loaded up the cart. He said, you want it pasteurised, 'cause pasteurised is best. She says, Ernie, I'll be happy if it comes up to me chest. That tickled old Ernie. And he drove the fastest milk cart in the West. Now Ernie had a rival, an evil-looking man called Two-Ton Ted from Teddington, and he drove the baker's van. He tempted her with his treacle tarts and his tasty oatmeal bread, and when she seen the size of his hot meat pies, it very near turned her head. She nearly swooned at his macaroon, and he said, now if you treat me right, you'll have hot rolls every morning and crumpets every night. He knew once she sampled his layer cake, he'd have his wicked way, and all Ernie had to offer was a pint of milk a day. Poor Ernie! And he drove the fastest milk cart in the West. One lunchtime, Ted saw Ernie's horse and cart outside her door. It drove him mad to find it was still there at 4:30. And as he leapt down from his van, hot blood through his veins did course, and he went across to Ernie's cart and he didn't half kick his horse, whose name was Trigger. And he pulled the fastest milk cart in the West. Now Ernie rushed out into the street, his gold top in his hand. He said, if you want to marry Susie, you fight for her like a man. Oh, why don't we play cards for her, he sneeringly replied. And just to make it interesting, we'll have a shilling on the side. Now Ernie dragged him from his van, and beneath the blazing sun, they stood there face to face, and Ted went for his bun. But Ernie was too quick, things didn't go the way Ted planned, and a strawberry-flavoured yoghurt sent it spinning from his hand.
Oh dear. I'm declaring myself president of the Benny Hill Defence Society.
Yes, tell me about him. Tell us about
look,
him.
I was amazed. I loved his work.
A lot of people really didn't like him.
Oh, well, of course. I mean, if they don't listen very carefully and they don't understand his sense of humour, they'll think he's sexist. But, of course, he's being sexist really about himself and about all fellas. He's picking on the worst aspects of us and making something of it. But, of course, if you don't listen carefully enough and don't hear all the words, you'll probably think, oh, he's being a bit funny about women, and but he isn't really. He's being very strange about us blokes. But he was a brilliant comedian, and I also knew one of his writers, Dave Freeman, and Dave was a lovely guy. Dave had an Aussie wife. Dave was a former policeman, great big bloke. Used to do some of the sketches with him, and come up and I remember one lovely one when Benny Hill says, right, I'm going to get you a new jacket. He said, right, thank you. He said, we'll have it in shark skin. He said, no, I want cloth. And it was that sort of lovely stuff. But Dave was very useful to me. I wrote a play, a comedy, and we took it out on tour, and Dave came to see it. He said, I'll give you some advice. I said, yeah, all right, sure, Dave, all your experience. He said, retype it 5 times. I said, what? He said, retype it 5 times. I said, what? He said, Spike Milligan apparently used to retype every Goon Show script 5 times. I said, do you mean rewrite? He said, no, retype. And apparently the brilliant thing about Spike's idea, even if he wrote the most perfect Goon Show script, he'd still doggedly sit down and retype it, because no matter how much you don't want to change something, if by the time you've retyped something 5 times, you'll find that 3 words will do instead of the 10 you've written, and all that.
Oh, right.
And I've since, if I've got to write anything or put anything down on paper, I've arrived at a sort of method of doing the 5, not quite the 5 types, but I'll dictate it on tape, then I'll scribble it out in longhand, that's 2, and then re-record what I've scribbled out, that's 3, and then I'll try and type up the thing, that's 4, and I'm a bit limp about the 5th. But by the time you get there, you haven't really set out to rewrite. Rewriting can sometimes be deadly dangerous, and I've seen some great scripts mucked up by somebody being told, well, go home and it's a very good lad, but rewrite it. And they start to rewrite it. But I love Milligan's thing, and I'm very grateful to Dave Freeman and very grateful to Benny Hill, because through Dave's experience with Benny Hill, he became one of our great writers.
Yeah.
In England.
Oh, well, indeed. Now, we're going to have to say curtains at the moment, because we're running out of time. But would you come back and do another issue of your wonderful life?
Oh, I'd love to, if you can just shut me up at the right time.
Okay, well, we'll see you again. Bye-bye for now. You've been listening to Interludes.